In this episode of the Futures Thinking podcast, I'm inviting you to meet Professor Sohail Inayatullah, who is the author of the CLA methodology. We talk about the intuition, myths, and metaphors, why the narrative and the stories are important in the futures thinking, why CLA was introduced to the future studies, what is there behind the 4 layers of CLA, how do you link those 4 types of knowing into the world. You will also see how the personal CLA process works. You are listening to the Futures Thinking podcast, where we are sharing live conversations with people of business, design, arts, culture, science and nature who are shaping our futures today. I'm your host, Agata Bisping. Hello, Sohail. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today. I'm so thrilled we can talk, and this is wonderful that 2021 has brought us together in a way I believe never before it would have been possible. You are in Brisbane, I'm in Krakow, and our technical support is in Warsaw. So it's a world full of possibilities. And you are a futurist, a person that predicts the future. I've been told and come across a statement that a futurist is actually a fancy name for a designer, and the designer's main role is to anticipate, advance, and to find solutions. What are your thoughts on that? Would you agree?
I mean, I like that definition. I mean, the official definition is future studies is the study of possible, probable, and preferred futures and the worldviews and mythologies that underlie them. Now, my kind of Twitter definition is witches and wizards brewing up new potions to avoid bad futures and create good futures. So there's definitely a narrative dimension here. I work very much in the world of data. My first job was statistics, and also very much in the world of archetypes. There's always core narratives, core stories. Our role in futures is to ask ourselves, is the story I'm living the one I wish for, or can I create a new story? If I wish to create a new story, what are the best tools and methods to do that? Now, in our work, when I first started as a student in the 1970s, my one professor, was talking about robotics, AI, global governance, all that stuff. And my other professor said, this is a waste of time, a total can of worms. You're wasting your life. Get out of it now. So there was a sense that this is silly, stupid, not a field. And of course, now we've seen just amazing change from Berlin Wall to financial crisis, to internet, to genomics, to COVID-19. So there's a sense we are living in different times, and we need people, whether futurist designers, historians, who can give us a map and help us create different futures.
You've mentioned that your Twitter definition of the futurists are witches and wizards, and it instantly brings a metaphor and a narrative that correlates those names with something that is based in imagination, in intuition, and that it doesn't bring any correlation with the numbers, statistics, the facts, and the insight. Is it easy to make people believe witches and wizards?
Well, witch or wizard has to know science. Because if you're brewing a potion, you have to really understand biochemistry. You have to get it right. You have to create a potion that's different for each client. So we're doing the Pacific Community on climate change and the futures of New Caledonia, Fiji. Their needs are very different than I've been working with the government of Egypt the last few months on the future of manufacturing. So we always start with quantitative data. Here's the data. This is what it tells us. But when people say, well, just tell us the future already, we're very clear quantitative data and forecasting is not enough, because our forecast will be wrong. One, because the rate of change, and two, because when I make the forecast, we're in an open system, a complex system, and then the forecast becomes part of reality, and thus the future changes. So phase one of future thinking was forecasting, quantitative modeling. Phase two said, given the uncertainties, the unknowns, let's do scenario planning. Future one, future two, future three, future four. So the work we did at COVID-19 in last March 2020, we looked at all the literature and we came with 4 scenarios. We didn't do a forecast. We said scenario one is zombie apocalypse. Things get bad and bad. We don't react. We get, as happened in the US, probably up to 800,000 dead, as in India, as in Brazil, a sense of people using COVID as a political stunt to put down others. Scenario two we called the Great Pause, a time for meditation, for reflection, for slowing down, for decreasing pollution, to actually say, is this the right world we're creating? Future three was the global health awakening, that really by now it's amazing we actually have vaccines, we have public health, we have this sense even some of the new vaccines could lead to new health benefits. So this is part of a new health awakening, and future four was the great despair. The mutation leads to mutation, things get worse and worse. Nations fall apart. So when we did this a year and a half ago, we didn't know. So we said, since we don't know, let's create futures. So it went from forecasting to scenario planning, and then my work has been CLA, Causal Layered Analysis. Let's go deeper. What's underneath each scenario? It can't be just here's the world that's changing. It has to be, what is my ability to change that world? Am I merely someone in a raft riding a huge ocean with no control? Or can I have a sailboat which I can roll with the winds? Or do I have a solar-powered yacht where actually I create where I wish to go? So we want to not just predict or even scenarios or go over story. We want to help people increase their ability to change the future.
So this may be also the answer to my next question. Why you have stepped forward with the CLA methodology in order to help people create the future they want?
Yeah, I mean, what I noticed, I grew up all over the world, and in meetings I would see one group of people were like quant people. They said, interesting, here's the data. Population will be like this in 10 years. The world economy will be like this in 40 years. Okay, data gang. Group two were systems people. In your world, I think designers. It's not about the data. How do we design for safety? How do we design lighting in a city so females feel safer? How do we design educational systems so there's inclusion? So the better future became a design issue. That was level two people. Level three were the big philosophers, Nietzsche, Kant, Foucault, in my Indian philosophy, Sri Sarkar, Ibn Khaldun, the big picture thinkers. And level four were the storytellers. So I said, how do I find a way to link these four? And there were actually 4 types of knowing the world. So CLA became a way to think, okay, first, what's the data? What's the system that supports the data? What's the worldview? What's the metaphor? And how do I change it? So it became a vehicle to map and a vehicle to change.
Vehicle to map and a vehicle to change. Is it easy for people to follow CLA? I don't mean people of your profession, but for people that take part in the process. For me, as a scenario builder on the daily basis, so to say, it's really difficult to make people think different and think in alternative way, to think about, okay, this is the way you think, maybe we should explore some other stuff, maybe we should go to another scenario, let's think about it, let's our imagination grow in a way. And then there is next step, there is the CLA, which makes people even more confused, so to say, because it's easy to listen to the structure of it, and when you read about it, it's like, it makes sense. But then when you dive into it, you can easily get lost to differentiate, especially between the third and the fourth level, which are the worldview and the myths and metaphors. How do you handle that in the first place? And do you have any tips for people using CLA, how they can work with it?
So I find it easy, of course. So my challenge has always been, how do I explain this to a 10-year-old? So someone who's a politician understands CLA straight away. Every minister, every prime minister, every CEO I meet, they know it straight away because they live in the world of storytelling. They know they get reelected if they have a better narrative. So they get it. When I work with indigenous peoples around the world, whether every indigenous group I work with, First Nations people, they said CLA is what we do. We all live in story. What we didn't know how to do was connect it to Western systemic data thinking. So my colleagues in Africa, they said, aha, this now links storytelling with systems thinking. So we get it intuitively. Now there's a rational structure to link both. People in power find CLA difficult because it shows that the world they live in is not forever, but it's transitory. And the world we live in is actually designed, not given. So one of my favorite workshops in Bangladesh, Futures of Education in the Islamic World, someone said, aha, education in the Islamic world is an arranged marriage. The structure is given, the ministry says you just follow it blindly. CLA says, wait, why do we sit in rows? If we have new technologies, why must we sit in rows? Why must we be the same age group in a class? So my colleague Ivana Milovic, she did her PhD on educational futures in CLA, saying the structure we have education is given as if it's universal, it's not. She says in her PhD, if I show a group of people holding hands playing, no one thinks that's schooling. If they're on a desk, everyone says that's schooling. So CLA says, well, what's underneath it? What's underneath it? Underneath it is the factory. Underneath the factory is the metaphor of the prison or the metaphor of control. So then once we figure out the story, then we can make the transition. Now, if I'm when I work with young kids, I simply ask them, what's your vision of the future? So where do you wish to be? So then they take a few minutes, they go, in 2025, here's my life. Then I say, well, what's your metaphor of your life now? What's the story of your life now? And then they say, is there a link or not a link? One story I write about, the 12-year-old said she wants to be, by the time she's 25, a CEO of a bubble tea company. So, okay, that's fantastic. Then I said, what's your strategy? She said, well, I'm learning science, mathematics, right? That's how you become a CEO. I said, great. What's your metaphor? And then she stopped. She said, what do you mean? I said, well, how do you talk about your life? What does it feel like? She goes, aha, I'm in a room where the curtains are drawn. The blinds are shut. And then her friends with her all started to cry. And then she started to cry. And, of course, I said, what's the pain here? She goes, I just realized if I want to be a CEO, how can I be a CEO by 25 if the room is without light? So then I said, what's the better metaphor to get you there? She goes, aha, open the blindfold, let the sun shine in. Now, what we've learned, a story without data, without strategy, falls apart. So I said, if your new metaphor is let the sun shine in, what's your new strategy? She goes, aha, I need emotional literacy, not just scientific literacy. I need mindfulness, spiritual literacy, not just spending all day studying mathematics. So now she had a new story and a new strategy, and her friends in the room said, we can be your supportive community in this process. So when I work with CEOs, it happens all the time. They said, the world I live in no longer makes sense. So when you say, well, what's a better, describe your world to me. He said, well, I go to work, I make financial decisions. I said, no, I know all that. Said, what's your measurement? Well, profits per quarter. I said, we all know that. And I said, what's really going on? What does it feel like? He said, I feel like I'm a tennis player in a world where I no longer know which court I'm going to play on. That's a metaphor. That's a story I use a lot. So I said, okay, so it feels like he said, yeah, my skill set is only good at one court, grass court. I can only win at Wimbledon. But now I never know if am I going to be in Melbourne or in Paris or in New York. The world has changed so much. So the new metaphor was the man who plays on many courts. I said, okay, what do you need? And then again, he figured out his need was new strategy.
I have two questions now that simply came across my mind. How is it different from psychotherapy, actually? Because during,
we draw in many fields. So CLA of the external world, there's no psychotherapy. So what one country we're working with, they said, what's the issue? The issue is obesity, right? Diabetes, cancer rates are going up. What's the cause? Our financial system subsidizes fast food. Our city design is focused on fast food. What's the worldview? The worldview is how they see the world. Rice culture. It's all about rice. What's the metaphor? We live to eat. The purpose of life. Yeah.
So the metaphor should define the three levels above. Yeah.
The unconscious emotional level.
Yeah.
So you don't need to explain it. It means, aha, that's actually what you mean. Worldview is how you organize reality, how you see self, gender, space, time. It's the big picture, the German word Weltanschauung. System is, of course, the design issue. How do you design? What's your HR strategy? Your financial strategy? Litany is the data. So when we do CLA of countries or individuals, then in that case, we only live to eat. What's the better metaphor? They said eat to live. Your worldview is focused on rice. What's the new worldview? Well-being. What's the new system? Stop subsidies to fast food and rice. We will now subsidize plant-based food. What's your new measurement? Highest well-being levels in Asia. Lowest cancer rates, lowest obesity. So we link the story to the worldview, to systemic infrastructure strategy, legislation, to the new measurement. Now at the inner level, of course, it draws from psychotherapy, it draws from many fields. We are not engaged in therapy. Every organization we work with, say they develop their 4 scenarios, right?
Yeah.
And then I think, well, that's interesting. What do you do with that? So I work a lot with law enforcement. So I always ask the police, okay, you now have 4 scenarios of crime prevention, of crime, cybercrime, new types of crime. That's interesting, but what do you do about it? What's your metaphor? Who are you in that world? So if I don't link you in those scenarios, it's a waste of time. It's a great report. Minister gets it. Thank you. It was good. We've clarified alternatives. We have a better sense of uncertainty. Fantastic. But if I don't know my narrative, what can I do? So the clarity in every organization, all the individuals as part of the foresight process must know their story. One bank I was working with, he was brilliant. I said, okay, this is great. We've done the scenario work. Now what? He goes, well, now nothing. I said, why? He said, my metaphor is the man with the golden handcuff. They want strategy, but they don't go to implementation. Why? My hands are handcuffed, but with gold. Every time I give a strategy, they raise my salary, but nothing happens. So now,
what can you do with this? Then you can just leave your job.
Okay, so now here's the scenarios, personal scenario. Scenario 1, he leaves his job, right?
Yeah.
I'm sick of this, but he has a good salary, and they keep on raising his salary. Scenario 2 is, okay, how do I convince others who have golden handcuffs to let go of the handcuffs? How do we unshackle ourselves? How do we design better systems to go from vision to implementation? Option 2. Scenario 3 is bad health, right? You stay in an organization, no one loves you, you're working hard, your immune system crashes. Scenario 4 was the new metaphor. So he came up to me after, he goes, I need a new metaphor. His new metaphor was the Midas Touch. Instead of teaching people about economics, he now creates wealth himself. So I said, okay, if you're the Midas Touch, what does that mean? He said, aha, it's not just writing reports. I need to demonstrate how to create wealth, to create equity, to create new economic projects. So I had one senior innovation officer for one country. He said his old metaphor was Alice in Wonderland. Looking through, yeah. And then his new metaphor, he becomes the rabbit.
This is amazing because I will leave the second question after we later in our conversation because it deals with change. But from what you are saying, it actually doesn't matter if you are working with the organizations, countries, companies. What really matters is what the personal narrative is. Because even if you come with a great solution for an organization or a country, when people are left with their personal metaphor that doesn't come along with the perspective and the narrative that was built for the country or the organization or the company, it's never going to happen. Those will be just two separate worlds that coexist and observe themselves. So would the conclusion be that you need to work on your personal narrative and metaphors first before you step in a process of thinking about the future?
I mean, I find in my world, so I remember the first time I did this, it was for a large company. And we did the strategy work. Here was they showed me their data, projections for the next 10 years. Then I said, so who are you as a company? And they said, oh, we're Snow White. And I said, okay, who are you waiting for? They said, Prince Charming. I said, who's Prince Charming? They said, government funding. We only
Where are the dwarfs?
that became, you got it, you're brilliant. So the only issue was Prince Charming gave us money. They weren't reaching the dwarfs, the citizens. So they had one model of funding, which we know is risky. So this was a very exciting conversation. Okay, who are the dwarfs? How do we reach our citizens? How do they become part of our revenue enhancement? Now, one of the vice presidents started to get very angry. She criticized my colleague, and then she made a negative statement about me. And I stopped. I said, so who are you? She's the vice president. I knew that, but who are you? She goes, can't you tell? Now I got scared. She goes, I'm the wicked stepsister. And now we understood. Her goal was to sabotage the entire process. Because she understood if this process went on, she would lose social capital. And now here was my mistake. We had only was doing external scenarios, external narrative work. I hadn't spent time to create trust to develop personal narratives. And then the minute the project ended, I knew it was over. There was no way to move forward. So then I thought in every project, I have to ensure scenario work, CLA work, and inner work, so we have a chance to share stories and have the stories work together.
Can you show us how you do it? How you do the personal CLA?
Yeah, that's okay. We can do an example. So I mean, there has to be trust. So I mean, if there's some issue you're working on, I mean, you could be sharing this with so many people, so maybe not too personal. But is there something you're trying to figure out? You don't like your neighbor, you don't like the bill, something you're thinking about.
If personal is professional development, is it personal? Or is it not personal?
That's good. That's good. So what's the next stage in your life, you're kind of saying?
Yeah, exactly. Because I've been, so just to give you a context, I'm a mother of 4. And for the last, let's say, 6 or 7 years, I've spent at home sharing it with my own company, which wasn't actually a great company. It was rather self-employing, and I was a creative producer for the events that were related with design and architecture. And after some time, I realized that this is not what I want to do. I want to focus on my family and have time for them. And I want to use my intellect rather than my organizational skills, which are kind of, this is something that I do naturally. But I would like to feel competent and use this competence with others.
So you have a clear way forward. That sounds great. Okay, you have a vision where you're going to go. You have a history. Now you're at a juncture point. So then stage 1 of this process is called the litany. Yeah. Litany is what are the things I'm saying about this issue every day to myself and to others. How do I talk about it? So if you were talking to your partner, your kids, your colleagues, what do you say every day? So this is the personal part. I'm sick of this, or I'm so tired of this, or I can't wait, or this is you write down.
There are 2 ways.
Yeah.
There are 2 ways. I'm saying this is a process, and it must take a while for me to learn and to feel competent internally, because there are 2. For me, there are 2 layers. Obviously, someone views you as competent and what you feel about it. So this is the imposter syndrome I'm always dealing with.
Beautiful.
And basically this is what is my litany, that I feel competent, but at the same time I know I need to learn so much, and I'm so insecure inside that sometimes it stops me from taking the next step. So this is my litany.
Brilliant. So now it's level 1. Now level 2, the system of selves. We borrow from the work of Hal and Sidra Stone. They don't say there's one self, there's many selves. Pusher self, a perfectionist self, a pleaser self, controller self. There's 20, 30 more. Your father self, your mother self, child self. So we don't want to go heavily into theory. So what is the conflict with the selves? You already said, so which selves are in conflict? Because only things become an issue if we have some tension in there.
Well, I think that the mother self, me as a mother self, is in conflict with me as a professional self, because the work-life balance, as it is viewed, for example, in the Western world, that you should always be in balance with those two worlds, it's bullshit for me. So sorry to say it, because it's so contradictory that it's impossible to achieve. And also there is the control me. I'm control freak, unfortunately. So it's something goes, not in the line. I get scared and also frustrated that I have not been into the line with what I planned. And as you can imagine, having 4 kids, it's out of control. Obviously, you can organize it, but there are things, like black swans or pink elephants going on all the time. So it's hard to put it together.
Okay, so you have one self, mother self, that has duty to her kids. Then you have a professional self that wants to learn more, but is worried about imposter. Then you have a control self, given the risk to kids, given the risk in the economic climate, you need to control everything. And you have a fourth self that understands you can't control anything.
Exactly.
You kind of have this dance going between these 4 people.
Yeah.
And so if we did scenarios, so let's say scenario 1, in 10 years, if you did nothing, what would happen?
I would, if nothing happened, I guess I would stay frustrated, and I would be,
That's perfect. So that's the frustration world number 1. Scenario 2, you make some minor changes. Which self gets happy there? You do some little step-by-step progression towards well-being, towards balance, towards your new career.
I guess the one that the one that knows that nothing can be controlled, really.
Okay.
Steps in here.
So she starts to come in and says, okay, we trust, we're emergence.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's actually saying you want to move forward. And what's the scenario, a radical scenario outside all this that's beyond how you think about these things?
I don't know if I get it right now, but if I'm beyond, meaning I leave everything and I go away, or it means that...
Beyond the terms of our discussion, like you said, there's black swans, there's all these new things that can happen. What's something radical in 10 years that could totally be different about you and your life?
Well, I could change it totally, meaning I can always, I don't know how to say that. That's wicked.
Okay.
Because,
so we don't know that. Yeah, so that's it.
I don't know that.
Now what we're doing is we've now created space for the radical. We don't have to fill it right now.
So the radical would be, I would generally pack my family and go, around the world to teach my children and myself how to live without the system and without the systematic problems that put you in a certain drawer saying you need to do this because you live in this world.
Okay, so you're leaving controller, you're leaving mother, and you're becoming this explorer, the explorer of your future, exploring as a team around the world. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And what's one where you shift to this well-being model? That's your adaptive one. You're adapting to the changing world. How does that look and feel like?
I need to look at it.
Okay, fair enough. So now let's go deeper. Let's go back to the conflict. I just wanted to open up space. The level 3 of CLA is the worldview. Because we're always at some conflict, but always underneath the conflict is an original conflict. Like my wonderful colleague I've been working with 20 years, the brilliant Rob Burke. When I do this with him, his core conflict, and he'll happy to share that with you, was when he was 5, he had to go to boarding school. We all have something. For me, when I was moved to the US, I think I was 6, and my teacher asked me, do you know why Pakistan is so poor? I'm originally born in Pakistan. I said, I don't know. 6 years old, 7 years old. It's because you're all lazy.
Oh, no.
So now that set up a process where even in my 50s, my partner said, you're still trying to prove that teacher wrong. You're not present today. You're living a story from 50 years ago. And so we all have a story we live from the past. So going to you now, this conflict between mother, the imposter, trusting, the explorer, what does that feel like going back? When does that conflict actually start to begin? What's the worldview? Is it when you were a child, a teenager? What does it actually feel like?
Well, it feels like, I guess I have 2 points like this. The first is that when I was a child, I was often told that the best help I can give is not to interrupt. So I would become invisible in a way, because now as a mother, and it only came to me most recently when I said this exactly the same to my oldest daughter, and she goes, I hate that. You are making me invisible. And I was just like, wow, thank you. I mean, thank you for telling me this.
So you got it. You already got to. You went to level 3 and 4 straight away. You're so quick at this. Level 3 was the interruption when you were a child. And what's the metaphor? The invisible girl.
Yeah. So this is the first thing. And the other thing was that when I was in high school, I was born in fairly poor family. And I am the first child in every generation that I can recognize from my family that actually got a university degree.
Fantastic. Okay.
But it was, and I got into a high-profile high school where I've met the sons of and daughters of diplomats, university professors, and I was a girl from a village, from the neighborhood that would be very tough, and I really needed to work hard to substitute for not having great background and also for not having money. So I really pushed the education for myself. I really studied hard, but it was exhausting.
So is the metaphor climbing the ladder, or is the metaphor energy leaving you? So invisible girl is one story. The second story is having to climb because you weren't given the same
I think the metaphor for the other girl is the one that goes on the one that tries to run a marathon in a sprint mode.
Yeah, it's brilliant. You got it. Brilliant. You're so good at this. Okay. So running a marathon while sprinting. And of course you get exhausted. That's fantastic. Okay. So now we have the core story. And that's why you're imbalanced between profession and work. You're trying to do both at full speed, but it's a marathon.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's a better metaphor now? We'll do this rationally, then we'll do closed eye. So what's a better metaphor for you that fits better to where you want to go? Is the explorer?
I want to take a stroll.
Okay. Yeah. So running the marathon as a sprinter, walking the stroll, the story of the stroll. Okay. So what does that feel like? You're strolling, and what's happening?
I get to rethink things. Yeah. I can rest and take a pause and think what's good for me. Yeah. And I'm not exhausted.
Okay, perfect. Now we go up CLA. What's the systemic support you need? What do you need from your kids, your partner, community to support you in the stroll?
I need a village to raise the children.
So you don't want to stroll alone. You need people to help you in the stroll. We got it.
Yeah.
So your goal now is to find the community to help you. I was caught in one story where I felt handcuffed. I couldn't resolve this issue with this person. And my new story was community is the key. So then I called community members. I can't resolve this myself. Please help me. They did. It's resolved now. So you're going from running a marathon, like 100-meter dash, to taking the stroll, and community helps you. So now let's do a third part to this. This requires a meditative part. So you'll be breathing, close your eyes and we'll take you to the year 2030, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure. So I should close my eyes and breathe.
I'll lead you through it. It's okay.
Okay.
So you first become mindful. You slow down. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Everything slow. In your mind's eye, go to a happy feeling. Any feeling that makes you feel good. The feeling goes throughout your body, head to toe. You're in a beautiful room. You walk outside. There's a pathway. Let's walk. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's a green hedge. The hedge opens and you walk into the year 2030 or 2031. You walk into the future, now you're in your preferred future. In your mind's eye, let images of this future come to you. What are you doing? You have to answer me. No, it's okay. Just in your mind, just become aware of what you're doing. We'll debrief afterwards. That images come to you. Become aware of everything around you. Who else might be there? What does nature look like? Technologies. Let the most important images come to you. Now we walk some more. There's an ancient tree in front of us. We walk inside the tree. There's a spiral staircase. We glide up to the 6th floor. There's a room, a large room, and seated in the balcony is someone from the future. Could be you, a partner, a teacher, a mentor, your future self. You look at that person looks at you. You take a deep breath, and they give you a message. On a piece of paper, they write down a message, and they give it to you. And you thank them in your mind's eye. Now you sit in a comfortable chair in the room. Now let's remember our metaphor from before. It could be the 100-meter running as the 100 meters in a marathon, or if you prefer the stroll, just imagine that metaphor, let it come to you. Now you hear in the background a beautiful sound. Soft sound. It could be some chanting, some bells, any sound from your spiritual tradition, a chanting sound that gives you peace. Sound gets louder. It envelops you. And now the sound touches the image, your old metaphor. Let a new metaphor come. A new image comes to you now. You can see something new emerging. And now you look again at the person from the future and they give you a gift. It's touchable. You open the gift, it's an artifact. It should help you in your journey. You thank them. We go down the steps. We glide down. We're outside the tree. We're slowly walking back to the hedge. And now let's go back. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you slowly open your eyes again. So any gift, message, metaphor, anything that emerged for you? And if it's too private, it's okay. You don't have to share it. This is not...
Can you please repeat? Because...
Okay, so did you see any, what emerged from you? In terms of, did you get a gift, a message, or did some new metaphor come to you?
I read a message. I received a gift.
Okay.
The new metaphor is something that I found hard to envision.
That's okay.
Because I think I was too into now still. Doing this for the first time, I was just,
So let's stay with the...
I didn't say it, but what I felt was...
Yeah, perfect. It's the feeling part. Yeah.
What I felt was, I felt peaceful. That was the overwhelming feeling that I was in.
So you want to be led by peace. Some people are visual, some are feeling based. And so you try to, so the main thing I hear from that is that just the stroll should be a peaceful stroll.
Yeah.
That's what's important. And how about the message? What was the message from the future?
The message from the future was from my husband, who was sitting at the balcony. Yeah. And he wrote to me, let's go somewhere together.
Okay, so that's the exploration. So explore self is being validated. And how about the technology?
Yeah.
And the gift?
The gift was stone. A stone, a nice stone, a nicely shaped stone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's to ground you or to...
And the technology actually, I guess to put me back in touch with nature. This is something that really calms me. When for example, when I'm surrounded by nature, and when you were introducing me in the state, you told me to envision something that makes me calm. At least I understood that. I just imagine simply sitting at the beach with a big sea in front of me, and this is what keeps me down. So something that is with me in nature. And as far as technology, actually, when I went into the tree, it was the place where I saw technology, because the stairs were just like, like the Jetsons, like something that I could climb or just, go up. So, yeah, this is fascinating.
Yeah. So the idea behind this is, now to theorize it, it comes from the work of Elise Boulding, the feminist Quaker. And she said, you always, unless you imagine it, you don't know what to do. So the scenarios are to open up the imagination. Then we imagine it. And then you have to have this relationship between you and the future. And then the way the sound works, the sound connects you with your deeper self, the future self.
How do you build that relation?
With future self? I mean, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone has a different technique. Some people find time in nature to slow down. Some people meditate. Some people, as you're doing projects, you try to imagine your future self guiding you. So you say, well, what do I want if I'm 90? Would I still be doing this? What do I want to do? So the main idea in future studies, we're led by our image of the possible future, the preferred future. Most times we're led by the past. So the future is
only the tool of designing today.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So it starts out as quantitative forecasting, now becomes a tool for inner change, outer change. That's the shift. That's exactly it. And then the gift for you is, okay, your partner exploring peacefully the stroll.
Yeah. And you're mentioning the change. And this was the second question I wanted to ask at the beginning of our conversation, because change is somewhere between the trauma and the challenge.
Yes.
And it is so difficult. It is so difficult even when you know yourself from the future. You know all the tools. You know how to backcast yourself from the future you want to today. You get all the tools and all the stuff you need to have in order to become the envisioned future of yourself. How do you deal with change when change, for example, for me, is this holder, is holding me back. I know that challenge, that change is something good for me. For example, I know that if I will cross the line or make that one push forward, I know that there is something new that I want waiting for me. But oftentimes, change is too difficult to grasp. So how do you deal with change?
In your case, you've already answered it. Don't run the 100-meter dash. Stroll. If it's too fast, it's not going to work. If it's too slow, it's not going to work. Stroll peacefully, gently towards the future you want. That's what your higher self, your deeper self, your future self is telling you. So everyone has a different answer. I remember with one person, he said he was an iPhone in a room full of Nokias. And so then he had to change his story because the Nokias didn't like that. So he changed it to co-design chip makers. We worked together to design a different future. Then we did this meditative metaphor part. He became a warm, loving son. She said, the real solution to his issue was not new technology. The solution was caring towards his colleagues. That was his goal, to show care and concern, not to say I'm better than everyone. So we're trying to find the rational strategy and the inner strategy. So he had to balance the two to continue to be co-design iChips, co-design, enhanced technology, but also in the context of loving everyone. So emotional connection became the most important thing. I know in organizations, people always remember that part. So we want to understand change, but it's each other on the journey forward. So futures really isn't about, of course we want to think, robots run everything in 2050, but that's not the real issue.
I must say I am amazed because this methodology and this way of working with futures is based on intuition, on metaphor. You said you were using the data. That is obvious. I mean, this is also the part of a business that it needs to sell. So yes. People in business, in governments, they need data, they need numbers. But on the other hand, it is so deeply immersed in spiritual, in intuition. And would you say that there are nationalities or regions which work better with the CLA than the others? You've mentioned that for African people, for example, it was easy because we live in that, so it's easy for us to operate on the level 3 and 4. And what comes to my mind is the European mindset, the North American mindset, where intuition is something not really thought of as that good, as methodological, as empirical, as data-based. Is it harder for you to work with people of the European, North American civilizations?
I mean, for me, it's both and. Because if the history of Europe is this expansion, technology, conquest of nature, but Europe also has this other side, the witches and wizards.
We've burned them all. So,
Well, there's some still.
It doesn't say well about us, okay?
So what I find in organizations, if I'm 30 people and 25 are MBAs, metaphors are more difficult because they've pushed away narrative thinking for quantitative strategic thinking. And yet, when I look at the CEO of the company, they're very strong at metaphor. So then I say, well, do you always want to be the business analyst or do you want to run the company? If you want to run the company, you need to also understand intuition and story. If you want to stay as the chief financial officer, fine, stay in numbers. But behind every number is a story. The story of show me the bottom line, that's the story.
Yeah.
Every leader speaks in terms of narrative. So I try to, in every group, find out what do they need for the transition. When I was working with politicians, here's how the world is changing, here's the story part. They said, look, we have one concern. I said, what's that? We want to get reelected.
Yeah, that's the main goal, yeah.
So then the issue was, show me how a new vision of 2040 gets me reelected in 2021. So then the backcasting worked. So everyone, and then they said, okay, then I said, well, what's your story about your city? It can't just be clean roads. I mean, no one's going to, what's value added? What's the special thing that brings enchantment to your city? So we're trying to do both the quantitative world and the enchantment world, the external drivers, the inner forces. We're trying to integrate that because our hypothesis is that's more efficient. So efficiency comes from linking metaphor with strategy. The other stuff is inefficient because you're lost in data or lost in story. Cultures where everyone only talks about story say, wait a second, you still have to have the trains run on time. The roads have to meet. There's a design issue there. You have to link story to design.
Yeah. If you're in your talks, you said that culture it's strategies for breakfast, and I kind of now figure out that if you come up with a new metaphor, then you come up with a new narrative that helps you set the mind in a way you would like it to be in the future. And that's the easiest way to help people shift from what they thought to what they can learn about the future.
Well, so this has become, okay, so I know when we were doing a workshop on Mr. Trump 4 years ago, and we did a CLA game. And in the game, the character playing Trump always had the best story. And no one could beat his storytelling. And you know what won at the end? The system. The rules and regulations enforced. Say, yes, your story doesn't work within constitutional law. So actually is the rules of elections ruled over his story. He's still trying to say fake news, but the rules won. So I'm always both.